Hello students, welcome back. So today you will have some reading practices. But before we have the reading text, let's learn some vocabularies that you will have in the text. Here I have already prepared 6 vocabularies that you can find in the text. The first one is impenetrable. It means difficult to understand. Then the second one we have compelled, or it means forced. Then the third one is fumbled, or felt around for something in an awkward way. Then we have lira. It is the form of money used in Italy before the euro. We also have merlons, or solid parts of a fortress wall. And the last one is crenel, or cut out part of a fortress wall. In order to help you understand more about the vocabulary that we have already discussed, let's have vocabulary practice. In vocabulary practice, you have to rewrite the sentences. Use the right word in each new sentence. Write them down in your notebook. For example, the first word you have impenetrable, and you have the sentence. Can you please re-explain, as her explanations is really difficult to understand. What you have to do is that you can find the words or phrases that have the same meaning or similar meaning as impenetrable. So in your notebook, what you have to write is, can you please re-explain, as her explanations is really impenetrable. Do you guys understand what you have to do? I'm sure yes. Now let's continue. The second word is fumbled. Then the sentence is, they moved awkwardly in the dark, trying to find their way out of the cinema. Find words or phrases that have the same meaning as fumbled. Then the third is compelled. I felt forced to report the incident clearly. So find words that have the same meaning as compelled. Then the last is lira. This kind of currency is used long time ago before euro. Okay, boys and girls, let's now move to the reading text. We will talk about a text entitled A Game of Light and Shade, written by Arturo Vivante. But before we read the text, I want you to prepare your notebook. Then, along with the reading practice, note down the important information from the text in the form of mind map, so that later when we have the reading comprehensions test, you already have something to look at, or you already have your note. Okay, now let's start with the reading text. It was a sunny winter day. I had gone up and down the tower, and I felt pleased with myself for having taken this initiative. When outside the little door at the foot, a blind man came toward me. He was a pale, thin man with sparse black hair and dark glasses that gave him an impenetrable look. He kept close to the inner wall of the courtyard, gazing it with his arm. On reaching the door, he touched the jamb and sharply turned inside. In a moment, he disappeared up the staircase. I stood still, looking at an empty space left by the open door, and at the little plaque that said to the tower nailed to the wall. I felt compelled to follow. I didn't follow closely. I caught up with him in the ticket office. There I was surprised to see the attendant selling him a ticket as though he were another visitor. The man fumbled for it, sweeping a little space of desk with his hand until he had it. But the attendant didn't seem to take any notice. Then, with the ticket in one hand and touching the wall with the fingers of the other, he reached the staircase leading to the terrace. I stood by the desk, watching him until he was out of my earshot. That man is blind, I said to the attendant, and expected him to show some concern. But he just looked at me with his sleepy eyes. He was a heavy man who seemed all one piece with his chair and desk. He is blind, I repeated. He looked at me vacantly. "What would a blind man want to climb up the tower for?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Not the view, certainly," I said. "Perhaps he wants to jump." His mouth opened a little. Should he do something? The weight of things was against him. He didn't stir. "Well, let's hope not," he said, and looked down at the crossword puzzle he had begun. The blind man was now out of my sight. I turned toward the staircase. "Ticket," the attendant said, rising from his chair. It seems the only thing that could move him. I handed him a 50 lira piece, and he detached a ticket from his book. Then I hurried up the staircase. The man hadn't gone as far as I imagined. Much less time had passed than I thought. A third of the way up the tower, I heard his step. I slowed down and followed him at a little distance. He went up slowly and stopped from time to time. When he got the terrace, I was a dozen steps behind, but as I reached it, he wasn't to be seen. I dashed to the first corner of the bell tower, around the next, and saw him. At last, after 10 minutes, I approached him. "Excuse me," I said with the greatest courtesy I could summon, "but I'm very curious to know why you came up." "You'd never guess," he said. "Not the view, I take it, or the fresh air on this winter day." "No," he said, and he assumed the amused expressions of one who poses a puzzle. "Tell me," I said. He smiled. "Perhaps coming up the stairs you will have noticed, and yet, not being blind, perhaps you won't, how not just light but sun pours into the tower through the narrow slit-like windows here and there, so that one can feel the change. The cool staircase suddenly becomes quite warm, even in winter, and how up here behind the melons there's a shade. But as soon as one goes opposite a cradle, one finds the sun. In all the Siena there is no place so good as this for feeling the contrast between light and shade. It isn't the first time that I've come up." He stepped into the shade. "I'm in the shade," he said. "There is a melon there." He moved into the sunlight. "Now I'm opposite the cradle," he said. "We went down the bell tower. An arch is there," he said. "You never missed, and the sun isn't even very strong," I said. "Strong enough," he said, and seemed as pleased as a child who, in a game of hopscotch, jumps from square to squares. "We went down the tower together. A window there," he said, "up near the top. Another window," he said, when we were half down. I left him gladdened as one can only be by the sunlight. Okay, boys and girls, I think it's a really nice story, right? It is a story about a blind man that make us be thankful and be grateful for everything that we have. Okay, now let's move to the reading comprehensions practice. Here I have the first questions. How does the writer establish the setting in the first two sentences? You can pick more than one answer here. We have 5 choices here, 5 choices of answer here. The first is by introducing the place that contributes to the mood and tone of the story. Then the second one is by telling the place that can evolve and change as the story progresses. Then by giving descriptions of the places in which the characters have or do certain activities. Then by describing the time that can lead to the plot of the story. Then the last by bringing up the character senses. In order to answer that, we have to reread the first 2 sentences. It was a sunny winter day. I had gone up and down the tower and felt pleased with myself for having taken this initiative. When outside the little door at the foot, a blind man came toward me. So here we have a setting that talks about the atmosphere or feeling. A sunny winter day, it talks about the weather or atmosphere that can also talk a bit about the mood or the tone of the story. Then we also have I felt pleased. It also talk about the senses or what the writers or authors feel. Then we also have I think we also have the tower here as a setting that talks about the place in which the characters do a certain activities. Now let's check the choice of answers. The first one, by introducing the place that contributes to the mood and tone of the story, I guess it's clear. We have the explanations about the atmosphere here from the beginnings. Then we also have the description of place in which the characters have or do certain activities, that's in tower. Then the last, by bringing up the character senses. In the first sentence, the writer said, I felt pleased. But in the first two sentences, it doesn't talk about the places that can evolve and change as the story progresses. We don't have the progress of the story yet, it's still in the beginning, so I think it's inappropriate for the answer as the answer. Then the other choice is by describing the time that can lead the plot, so it doesn't talk about that time yet, although it talk about winter, but it doesn't really lead us to the plot of the story. Okay, let's move to the next questions. What is the narrator doing when he first sees the blind man? I think it's also clear in the first paragraph. In the last part of the first paragraph, it said, I felt compelled to follow. It means that the writer or the author, the narrators finally follow the blind man. So the answer is he shadowed him to the tower. So he ran after or followed or shadowed him to the tower. Okay, let's move to the next questions. Why does the blind man climb the tower? I think it's also clear because the blind man want to visualize or want to see the difference between light and shade. He want to see it and he want to visualize it, and he said that Siena Tower is the best place to feel the difference between light and also shade. And the last questions, why do you think the author uses the word game in the title? I think it's clear in the last part of the text, in which the writer say, let me show you the last part of the text. Here the writer show you, he said and seemed as pleased as a child who in a game of hopscotch jumps from square to square. So it shows us by giving the title Game of Light and Shade, the writer would like to emphasize the feeling of the blind man as the main characters. How does he feel? He feels joy, like he is playing a game, of light and shade. He is not feeling sad or anything else, but he just feels joy, like uh, he is playing a game. Okay, boys and girls, those are all comprehensions questions that we have today. We will continue and have other questions later in the classroom or in another video. Thank you for your attentions, and don't forget to click like, share and subscribe button. See you in class. Bye bye.